Okay, so today we're going to talk about kokanee. This is applicable to trout as well. Kokanee early season, water temps are a little colder. They're up higher in the depths of the lakes and whatnot where they reside. Do we all understand what a kokanee truly is? So it's a sockeye salmon, right? But it's in a lake or a body of water mass that is landlocked, so they can never go to salt water. They will reside in a lake 3 or 4 years, and they do actually spawn. So most of the lakes you find kokanee in have some means of a creek or naturally spring fed. These fish are pretty crafty in that if they have little creeks and things feeding into the lake, they will actually go up into the creeks and spawn after 3 or 4 years, depending on the time of release. And I can get into all the reasons why they spawn different times and stuff, but I'm not going to bore you with that. All we know is that they're extremely delicious. They fight a heck of a lot harder than a trout of similar size. You get a 14-inch rainbow, they're okay. You get a 14-inch kokanee on a light rod, and we'll talk about fishing rod options and things. They are a hard pulling, spinning, jumping, great little fish to go after. A lot of fun for the kids, but for a grown adult, it can be a kick in the pants too. It's a fishery that can become addicting in a sense that when you think you have them figured out, then things change and all of a sudden you're not catching them and you're trying to figure out why. It's like any other fishery, right? But once you start patterning lakes at certain times a year and figuring them out, you can find you're having success. They're fantastic on the barbecue or your Traeger or whatever. They are phenomenal smoked. They are a sockeye. They're full of oil. Some of the best tasting fish that comes out of a lake that I know of. And who's ever seen a 5-pound kokanee? Who's ever caught a 3 or 4 or close to 5-pound kokanee? You know, we have lakes in the state of Washington or reservoirs where you can get a 3, 4, 5-pound kokanee. Lake Roosevelt, east side, and other lakes as well. I've taken my boat all the way to Wyoming for Flaming Gorge, world-renowned kokanee trout and cutthroat fishing. 4 and 5 pound kokanee. They look like little footballs. They are amazing, okay? So it's all about how much effort you're willing to put into it to go seek out these destination fisheries and or stick around home, learn the lakes within, you know, an hour of your house and put in some time. So there's different phases into kokanee fishing, and I thought today we'd focus on early season on a budget is kind of what this is called, because look, I got a beautiful brand new boat sitting out here that's equipped like tremendously. I'm very blessed to have that. It's got the latest state-of-the-art electronics and downriggers and all the things I would need to fish any depth of water going after kokanee. Do I need all that to be successful? Absolutely not. Okay, so we're going to talk about things that you can do that most of us can afford to do, especially if I already have a small boat. I go after trout, or I've been trying to catch kokanee. I don't have downriggers. Maybe I have electronics, maybe I don't. Well, how am I going to find them? So I want to talk you through all that. We can take it to whatever level you want. It can go from my boat out there all the way down to a kayak, you know, everything in between. That's what we're going to talk about today, okay? So flatlining options, early season. Now those kokanee, remember I said footballs?
Yes.
Those are from Flaming Gorge, Wyoming. All right? And when you're fishing by yourself because your wife doesn't want to get out of bed and your son decided to sleep in as well, and then you get 2 of them on at once, you know, with these you got your hands full, guaranteed. Let me get out of your way. When I get excited about kokanee fishing, this is what I get excited about. 4-pound fish. Look at the kype on that guy. Huh? Look at the size of that dodger. Okay, you can see, I mean, one big fat rainbow, but that guy there, I was like, holy smokes. That wasn't even the biggest one of the trip. So, but what we're talking around here, 12 to 14-inch average, pretty nice size fish. American Lake, for years, you know, Bill Herzog and I would go out there on my drift boat, kicker motor, some electronics, old electronics that I fashioned onto my drift boat, telescoping transducer that I made so I could pull it up when I was on the river or put it down when I'm in the lake. Hand crank downriggers. And back then, man, 10 years ago, American Lake, we're catching 15-inch kokanee that are this, you can't put your hand around them. They're so fat. Now, you give me any lake here on the west side with 15-inch kokanee that are that fat, I'm there like all the time. Because they are amazing. And American Lake kind of ebbs and flows. It'll have a really good year. You might have, we had a season out there a few years ago, and I didn't have much time to fish it, but most of the guys that were getting them would get 1 to 3 fish a day, but everything was 19 to 22 inches. And just fat, right? Then the next year, it's a bunch of fish that are, 14-inch fish. It's very cyclical. And some lakes you get fish that there's less of them, but they're bigger. So when you find that solo fish out there, it's a successful day. And other years, when they're smaller and there's abundance of them, you're catching a lot of them. What is the limit for kokanee in the state of Washington? 10. What's the limit on trout? 5. Is the limit 10 mixed in with your trout, or is it separate limits? Separate limits. Each angler on lakes that have kokanee, you can go catch 10 kokanee and 5 rainbow. A lot of folks think it's 10 fish total, but it's a separate limit, okay? So, getting at them early season, no downriggers, just flatlining gear, dodgers. If I'm dragging this double D dodger or something like a sling blade, does that take my gear down in depth if I'm just flatlining it 100 feet behind the boat? Yes. Okay? So, flatline, no weight, 4.4 double D dodger, that's what this is here. These pink ones by Max Lure. Or the sling blade, 4 to 6 inch. And I'm typically doing 100-foot setback. And I'll tell you why here in a little bit, but 80 to 100-foot setback. I'm achieving depth 10 to 15 feet with the double D, according to Max Lure, 5 to 10 feet on the sling blade. So just putting that dodger on there with some type of small presentation behind it, 12 to 14 inches, 9 inches, whatever my leader is, flatlining that 100 feet out behind the boat, doing like 1.4 miles an hour, that dodger is taking my presentation down anywhere from 5 to 10 feet. Just as a starting point, okay? So now let's add a little bit of weight to it. Oops, wrong one. Here's my weight chart. If I add a single 1 ounce little cannonball and I'm out 100 feet and I have nothing else on it, that cannonball is dragging back there behind my boat 17 feet down the water column. I'd say it's a solid 15-foot average on depth based on your troll speed, which is typically 1.2 to 1.4. So if I'm down, we'll just, because I'm simple and I like simple math, 15 feet with a weight, 1 ounce, 100 feet behind the boat, and I put a dodger on that's achieving 5 to 10 feet, I'm simply getting down without a downrigger or nothing, 20 to 25 feet, right? Early spring water temperatures and where the thermocline wants to try to start building, which is just a fancy way of saying where all the food source is, those kokanee can be anywhere from 15 to 25 feet. So we're out there flatlining dodgers and something that's attractive to a kokanee, the right kind of bait, and you're trolling for trout, and you have kokanee in the lake, don't be surprised if you start picking up a few kokanee. It's very achievable. And I've done nothing expensive, added no downriggers, I'm not going down deeper. Do I need electronics to find those fish? Most of the time, if fish are 20 feet or shallower, you're not even marking them on your electronics because they're too high in the water column. Your electronics put out a cone, right? Length of the boat, width of the boat, depending where that transducer is, it's putting out a cone of vision. And if it goes like this at a 45 and those fish are up here, here's your boat, here's the fish at 20 feet and your cone goes here, it's not even getting picked up in the cone, right? So you may not even see them. You might see them rolling on the surface and think they're trout, and all of a sudden you start getting some nice shiny little critters and you go, what are these things? Oh, these might be those kokanee that idiot was talking about in Puyallup. Yeah. So adding depth is pretty easy, and do yourself a favor, simple Google search, adding weight to my troll presentation, or how deep will my trout gear go or my kokanee gear go by adding 1 ounce of weight 100 feet behind my boat. You'll have charts popping up all over the place. It's really easy to achieve this information. So back in the day, here's my drift boat. Here's a little side mount downrigger. They don't all fit real well on certain types of, the way your gunnel is designed. I had some old rubber bed bumpers from my F-250 when I put airbags on. And I held on to those things, and I was like, heck, I drilled a hole and I stuck them on there, and it made just the perfect gap to where on the back side of the boat, the inside of the boat, I could crank down the spindle, and that downrigger was on the drift boat. You could use a block of wood, something to take up the gap. If you got a small aluminum 12-foot boat or a Livingston or something like that, most of the time these small hand crank downriggers will work. This is just one version. I think those were Cannons back in the day. Scotty makes a version. Here's the best poor man's downrigger right here. Anybody ever break a fishing rod, a salmon rod? Get yourself a reel with a really good drag. If you have one with a line counter, that's a bonus. Look at this. Here's a 2-pound weight. Now, how much depth did I get out of that 1 ounce cannonball? 17 feet. If I have a 2-pound weight, for example, and I have to limit the weight based on the strength of my reel, because I do want to be able to get this thing back up. Now, use an older reel or something, and that you can reel it up, but how deep can I go with this 2-pound weight? And how much line's on this reel, So if I want to get down to, say, 15, 20, 25 feet, I can probably get there by adding weight to my presentation. And when I'll back up for a second. When I'm adding weight to my presentation, see here I have an inline swivel clasp, 2 beads and rubber bobber stops so that I can adjust this wherever I want it to be. And all I do is on that swivel is I hang a small cannonball lead. Now you never run, don't worry, that rod's not going to break. You never run your weight right next to your swivel that I clip my Dodger to. Let me put this on here real quick. And then we're going to hang a leader on this. Why don't I do that for you just so you can see. Let's see, here's one. Look at this. If there was kokanee in this room, we'd be catching them right now. This is money. This little pink double D and this little smile blade. Look how short that leader is. Lots of action on this lure because it's only a 9-inch leader. Now my point is, when I'm fishing that clipped into a downrigger, we don't have this on there. I mean, that's it, right? And we'll get into that a little bit here, but if I was to hang a cannonball or a 1 ounce weight on this, right here in front of that Dodger, how much is that Dodger able to do what it's supposed to do? It kills the action, okay? It literally just kills it. It just sits there and drags behind the boat. So I rigged these so I can move them. Of course, I put that on the wrong one, didn't I? I moved them up the line away from my Dodger because I want that Dodger to do what it's designed to do, and that's move back and forth. So I'm going to take this little gizmo here. I'm going to slide that up the line like 2 feet, 3 feet. It doesn't matter. I want it way out of the way of what this thing's going to do. Now this is going to be down there doing its thing, and the weight's going to be out in front of it. I usually go at least 2 or 3 feet, okay? I want it to be well enough away, so if I'm hanging a weight off of that, and this is doing its thing, you can see how this is going to be freed up just to do what I need it to do. Sometimes the distance on this is, once I have that set, I can only reel that to the tip of the rod. Can I net a fish right here if I'm fishing by myself, right? Can I extend that out to 5 feet if I have a long handle net and I can still get to the fish? Sure. So it's kind of up to you what you're comfortable with. But if you're going to add weight in line to your presentation, make sure it's several feet out in front of your presentation. So this is doing exactly what it needs to do, okay? Make sense? I can get away from any of that if I'm using something like this. This is no different than a downrigger. I have a rod holder here. I clip my line into this little clip. Now you got to be kind of coordinated because you got to let this down and this down at the same time, just like running a downrigger. But I get this down to depth, say 25 feet. I lock it. I stick that in the rod holder. This is down to depth. My line is clipped in here, and we're trolling along. When the fish hits, it's going to pull the line out of this clip, and this is just going to be dragging in the water. And I'm going to fight the fish on here without any extra weight, and we're going to get that fish in, right? Everybody understand that? Yeah. So this is just a means of getting deeper. And again, you can use different types of weights. You know, this is a 3 or 4 pound weight. If I have a reel strong enough to pull up that 4 pound weight, I can do that. 2 pounds is pretty close to your max. Again, we're not trolling real high speed, so it's not like that 2 pound weight is getting pushed way back there. I mean, at 1.4 miles an hour, 1.2, it's staying pretty vertical. There'll be a little angle to your line. So if your line counter says 25 feet and you got a little bit of blowback because of your speed, it might be down truly at 22 feet. But if you don't have electronics, and in most cases, as long as you purchase your 2-rod endorsement and you're fishing by yourself, or if there's 2 of you on the boat and you can run 2, 3, or 4 rods, and you don't have electronics, it's a great time to put them at different depths. At least 5 feet of separation. And now I'm hunting and pecking, I'm finding fish. We got a rod set at 15, 20, 25, and 30. They keep getting hit on the 20-foot depth rod. What depth are we putting most of our rods to? 20 feet. If it starts off like that in the morning and we're getting into fish and we're being pretty productive and all of a sudden it stops and it's a sunny day, sun's coming up on the water, what do you think the fish are doing? Going a little deeper. It's like salmon fishing in Puget Sound. Once the sun starts hitting the water, especially if it's really flat and there's nothing on the surface breaking up the light penetration, it's going to go deep in clear water. And those fish, Kokanee have big eyes, they're going to go a little deeper. So I start bumping a few rods a little deeper. Oh, look at that, we just got one at 30 feet. Put 2 rods at 30 feet, we'll run 2 at 20. Kind of play that game, okay? So that's some options. So the poor man's downrigger, as I call it, and of course the manuals are great. If you do get manuals, I mean, they're not real expensive, and if you can find some that actually have built-in line counters, that's a bonus. If you don't, most of these, 1 full revolution on your spool is 1 foot. The other thing you can do, now this comes with wire on it. I would change those out and put 200-pound braid. It's quieter, it's easier to manage, wire kinks, it makes noise. If you take the tension off of these, sometimes it's kind of springy and it just kind of comes uncorked. And 200-pound braid online, I mean, it's so inexpensive anymore. Take that wire off, spool up a bunch of 200-pound braid, and it's very easy to use, and you're going to be a lot happier with it. So if you're doing that and you don't have a line counter, you can also take your braid and you can go 10 feet, and you can take a black felt marker and take about a 3-inch strip right there and just color it black. And then go another 10 feet and take a red permanent marker and color it red. You follow me? And then you just got to know your own system. Like black is 10, red is 20, blue is 30. And that's on my downrigger. And now I'm really just keeping track of what my depth is. Yeah, you're going to lose a little if you retie the end of your braid, because every once in a while you want to retie the end of your braid onto your clasp, because that knot might start getting worn or something. You don't want to lose a downrigger ball. So, but we're talking inches off of that. So, any questions so far on this simple stuff here? Okay, great. So now we up the game a little bit. Let's say we want to get some bigger manual downriggers that cost you a couple $100 or whatever, if that's within your ability to do so. Now these are the electronic ones on my other boat that I had, but kind of the same thing. The nice thing is now you're really upping your game to truly know where you're at. Look, when we're on the east side fishing Lake Roosevelt, like I was talking about, and we're going after those kokanee, they like to be really shallow up in the water column early season. Like we're talking 10 or 15 feet along with the trout. Do I need a downrigger? No. Is it helpful? Yes. Why? Because I put it down at 10 feet And keep in mind our setback, which is how much line we're letting out to where this gear right here is behind my boat. So when I say setback, that's 200 feet. Because they're so shallow that when you come through with your boat, the fish move. And as the boat goes by, they might come back to whatever was drawing them to that area in the first place. And you'll see these fish once in a while because they're feeding on the top, they're rolling around, they're doing trouty and kokanee things, and you're like, oh, look at all them fish over there. So we take the boat, kind of troll on through there. You'll push them fish apart, and when they come back together, you're 200 feet behind the boat, so the boat's well out of the picture, and that's why you're able to catch them. If you're 50 feet behind the boat or 30 feet behind the boat, you're not going to catch those fish. So our setback is a great distance. I'm thinking those fish are down 10 or 15 feet. I know if I add a dodger, I'm adding 5 to 10 foot of depth. And if I put it in my downrigger and put it down 10 feet, and I'm just trying to keep the math square to my head, I'm like, okay, that rod on the right is back 200 feet. I put it in the downrigger at 10 feet. I got that dodger. I'm going to say I'm fishing that one at 15 feet. The other one we're going to drop down to 15 feet, add my dodger equation in. That rod's fishing at 20 feet. I'm going to see which one's going to work. All the downrigger is really doing is helping you achieve an accurate depth. With an 1 ounce weight on here, 200 feet back, I'm kind of guessing, aren't I? I can look at the charts. I can assume what the charts are telling me are pretty factual. Maybe I'm catching fish, maybe I'm not. But if you're just looking, if you got the downriggers on the boat, you might as well use them, even if you're shallow water fishing, because it just really gives you a number. And if I'm catching fish and I can duplicate that number, because that's really what it comes down to, it's like, what depth did I catch that fish? Because I want to stay there for a while, right? Until I don't catch fish, and then I got to figure out, why am I not catching fish now? Do I need to go deeper? So even your shallow water fisheries with downriggers achieves a constant number that's reliable versus assuming. Make sense? That's why we started up on our game with that. Rods and reels, lots of options. Do I need a line counter? Kokanee rods are awesome because the parabolic bend, you know, we're not using salmon rods to catch kokanee. That takes the enjoyment out of it, right? The variables on expense that you're willing to take on, like here's a real nice one-piece 8-foot rod back in the day from Northwest Rods. I mean, have you guys fished with kokanee rods before? It's a different animal, isn't it? Cork handle, probably a little less expensive than, say, this edge rod with a composite handle or a, composite handle, and the glass blank here, but is this rod outperform this rod? Remember, I'm cranking them down in my not to this extreme, that was for an example back in the day, but I'm cranking them down on my downriggers and we're trolling. The enjoyment of the rod is when you're fighting the fish. A lot of these will perform very similar. It's a matter of, you know, back in the day with Lamaglass, this little white and red was fantastic, 7.5-foot rod. When this came out, it's like, oh, you got to have one, right? Well, I had to have 4 apparently. So, but again, it was reasonable because of the cork handle. Things started evolving. Back when we were with feather sticks, they started building different types of handles, and 8-foot, 8'2", rods started getting a little longer. Talon, who is here, has a 9.5-foot kokanee rod. Well, so I don't have one of those. So what am I doing? I'm standing in Talon going, oh my God, I got to have that, right? So do I? I don't know. This classic here from Eagle Claw, they came out with a number of years ago. How much do you think that fishing rod is? How much? Like 25. Yeah, it's like $24.99. And you pick that thing up and you're like, that's doing everything I want a kokanee rod to do. And it's kind of cool. They still put their ruler on the bottom end of that rod. It's like 24 inches marked off. You can use your fishing rod to measure your fish. But if I'm outfitting my boat, getting started, don't want to break the bank, that's kind of the premise of this whole deal, I can get 4 of those for $100 and some tax, right? And I'm sitting pretty good. Or I can up my game and start buying stuff like this. Line counters. Remember I talked about that setback, 200 feet. So a reel with a line counter is really handy because I'm going to let that out. Digital one, or mechanical ones are great. Electronic digital ones are great. You're going to pay a little more money for that, and after 5-6 years, you got to replace the battery in here. But these are great. The cool thing about this reel is every minute or two it beeps. Sometimes when you're kokanee fishing, you're trolling along, and you got a buddy or two on board, and you're just kind of BSing going through the day. You may not even see that rod in the downrigger going off. And all of a sudden your reel goes beep, and you look over there and you go, oh, somebody grabbed that rod. I mean, it happens more than you think. Do I need a rod that beeps and has a digital line counter? No. Okay? Is it nice to have? Yeah, but do I need it? No. Here's an old Abu Garcia with high-vis line. Now, I used to run Abu Garcias with high-vis line, and I would put 20 feet of clear mono top shot on it because I don't want high-vis line down by my gear. So I put 20 feet of clear monofilament top shot on there, so that's out in front of my gear. Then I hook my swivel on and my dodger and my leader. I would pull the high-vis line off of this spool at 25 feet. I would take a black felt marker and mark about a 3-inch strip. And then at 50 feet I'd do the same, and at 100 feet I'd do the same. At 150 I'd put another mark, and at 200 I'd put another mark. That stays pretty consistent because if I need to remove or cut anything off, it's in that top 20 feet of clear monofilament on the tip of it. And if I'm going to replace that, I'll replace the whole thing, and I always make sure it's 20 feet. Why? So my 50-foot mark and my 100-foot mark and up to 200-foot on my high-vis line is consistent. So I can put this out 200 feet by simply getting all the way to my very last mark on my high-vis mono, and I know exactly how far back my setback is. Agreed? So I don't need a reel that beeps at me. It reminds me to check what's going on, okay? So there are things you can do that doesn't force you to get into this. I can be very happy with the performance of that rod. I can find rods and reels. Believe it or not, eBay is still out there. You can find a lot of great reels on eBay and Marketplace and those types of things. And start buying some of your open face reels. You mostly have in your arsenal spinning reels and stuff and want to start kokanee fishing, I recommend getting some type of bait caster open face reel. And you can find, heck, guides are selling stuff all the time on Marketplace and things. You can buy 4, 5, 6, 8 reels all the same. You go buy yourself some fishing rods and start setting your boat up because you want to target kokanee. And you don't need all that fancy stuff, right? Right? Yeah. And you can get it done. So, or you can spend the high-end dollars, get the line counters. I mean, you can do whatever you want. I mean, you know, you want to make it enjoyable and successful. So there are some options to think about when you're looking for rods and reels. Electronics. That is one thing definitely guarantee will up your game of success for kokanee and trout fishing, or any fishing. Now, this was from my previous boat. These are schools of kokanee. Who doesn't want to see that when you're out fishing? Okay? Learning to utilize your electronics and then realizing what it's telling you and now how to adjust my gear to find success. If these fish are at 50 feet, I'm going to break a rod today.
And your phone.
And a phone. If these fish are at 50 feet and I am 100-foot setback and I am in my downrigger at 50 feet, where's my gear going to be? Anybody? Well, what dodger are you using? Are we using a double D? Are we using something like this? What's the depth on this one? It's about 10 feet. In other words, we got to know our gear, right? Because what we're dragging directly affects where my gear is at in the water column, and I got to do the math. If the fish are at 50 feet, and my downrigger's at 50 feet, and I'm adding 10 or 15 based on what I'm dragging behind everything, and is actually dragging through the water here at 60, 62, am I going to find fish? Am I going to find a majority of the fish? I'm underneath them, aren't I? So I always want to try to be about 5 feet above the fish because they're looking up. They're looking out and they're looking up. The other thing I'm doing is I'm also keeping my downrigger ball up and out of them. Because the downrigger ball coming through fish at 50 feet is like a boat going through them at 10 feet. It's going to push them away. So if I can somehow maintain the ability to stay above them as I go through them, I'm not going to push the fish away, and I'm probably going to see that I'm actually hooking into fish. So I look at where fish are. I'm always looking at my electronics. If you have 2 screens on your boat, one of them is set on your navigation so you can pick a depth line that you want to stay to. And the other one, or you split your screen, the other one is on sonar and fish finder so you can mark your fish. The previous boat I had, I knew that my 12-inch screen in the cabin I would set up for this, but my 7-inch screen in the back was my sonar and marking fish. And when I'd see fish on the screen, and they would start on the right side of the screen as the boat moved, the fish are traveling across my screen. Well, I always used 100-foot setbacks. Because when I saw the fish, I had time to raise or lower my gear so that by the time the fish were just getting off my screen, if I did it right, a rod was going off. That traveling on that screen at 1.2 to 1.4 is my boat traveling 100 feet. Sounds pretty anal, but I want to catch fish. So I'm figuring out what my electronics are telling me. I'm minding my gear. I know the depth I'm achieving based on what I'm dragging, and I'm doing some quick math. I went to public school, but I can still do quick math. And I'm like, they're here by the time we're 100 feet. So if I'm at 50 feet, I'm marking fish at 35. I'm bringing my downrigger up to 30 feet, maybe 29. And by the time we go through them at 29 feet, I got a rod going off. And it happens more than you would ever think. If I mark fish at 50 feet and I'm set at 45 feet and I go through, I'm probably dragging my downrigger ball right through them. I might get bit because there's a lot of them there. Would you agree? It's a lot of kokanee. So I'm probably going to get bit, but I can do a lot better if I'm playing the raise and lower game, marking fish, paying attention to electronics. Now, this is a pricey. Anybody want a fishing rod? This is a pricey bit of electronics, but I can get 7-inch screens, and we run all-ray marine, so that's why I put that up here, but we can get 7-inch screens that do a lot. I can split this screen, I can do sonar, I can do mapping, I can do everything I want. It's giving me water temperature, troll speed, depth, all the things I need. It'll 3D map all the stuff I want. I can find stuff like that for $400 to $500. Okay? Now it's an investment. Downriggers are an investment. Rods and reels are an investment. You have to decide what's going to give me the most bang for my buck. You know, if I have a budget of $1,000 to equip my boat, if I do better here and save a little by getting those Eagle Claw rods or repurposed reels or things like that, this is going to help me change the game more than anything else. Because I know I have different ways to get to depth. I can use certain other types of downriggers or systems. I can use different rods and reels. If I'm making an investment to up my game and find fish, I'm going with electronics. And if I have to spend anywhere from $400, $500, $700, I'm going to do that. Does that make sense? Everything comes at a price. So, just some things to think about on your electronics and how to make them, you know, work to your advantage. Uh-oh. Really? Dodgers. Dodger options. What's this picture represent? That's your gear under a black light. If we turn the lights off and put a black light up on this table, you would see that pretty much everything on my table has UV in one form of it or another. Everything you're fishing for kokanee and trout should have UV. Dodgers, as an example. And there's a lot of options out there, right? It's just a matter of what you particularly want to use. I can tell you, if I'm out by myself and I'm fishing 2 rods, one of them always has gold on it. And I will run gold, and a lot of my gold I put moon jelly tape on for a big UV flash. Sunny days, cloudy days, doesn't matter. I always run gold. Gold is like something I just go with all the time because it flat out works. And then you got just a variety. You know, the Max Double D is a great little dodger. The pink tape, the gold tape, different options. Brad's makes a tremendous amount of really good smaller dodgers that work really well. Lots of UVs, lots of bright colors, lots of contrast. Sunny days, bright colors, okay? Full sun, bright colors. You don't want big silver chromy flash on really sunny days in clear water. You want UVs and bright colors, so because you don't want to push the fish away, you want to draw them to you. Gold is great because the refraction and the attraction radius that gold puts off is very appealing to kokanee. Something about it that doesn't push them away. They don't think it's a larger predator. They want to go, hey, what's going on over there? You can have too big a flash and kokanee think it's a bigger fish than a predator. If you run smaller sizes and the appropriate colors to use on certain cloudy days and sunny days, you're going to draw the fish to you, not push them away. But you got a lot of options out there. You stay with the smaller dodgers. You know, I'm not running a lot of big stuff like this. These big, larger ones. I stick with the smaller ones. I don't think I pulled any of those. Like this, if I need to upsize to this, I'm not going any bigger than that 6-inch. Okay, that's still achievable. That still works. But I like to stick with stuff in that 4 to 5-inch range, 4.5-inch range in most of my dodgers. Purchase manufactured lures or build your own. How many of us are creating our own lures for any of our types of fisheries we're currently doing? How many of us are relying on manufactured lures and go purchase? Yeah, I mean, it's a great start. It's like all the bait curing and things I do and all the how-tos and videos and blogs and all that stuff I write and put out there. It's because I really like to cure bait and I like to go catch fish on my bait. My son Jordan ties phenomenal steelhead jigs. I want to go catch a steelhead, I'm using one of his jigs. How good does it feel to catch something on something you've created or come up with? There's a lot of satisfaction in that. Getting into it, you may just want to go, well, Max Lure puts out a ton of really good stuff, you know, like the little wiggle hoochie. It's just a little blade in front of a hoochie, pretty simple. A lot of the stuff I'm running, all the stuff on the table for the most part, not all of it, most of it. The Brad's kokanee cup plugs, fantastic. I could put bait and scent inside of them, which is, we'll get into bait and scent here in a little bit, but I can put bait and scent inside of those and throw those behind a dodger. Now, a lot of this stuff up here is 12, 14 inches, 9 inches, depending on which fishery it is. Most of the time we're running these at about 22. A little longer, because this thing is back there spinning, as we say, imparting its own action, okay? If I drag a hoochie behind a dodger, and I don't put a blade in front of it, the hoochie is whipping back and forth because of the dodger. The shorter the leader, the more action I get on the hoochie. The longer the leader, I lose that transition of movement, okay? And the hoochie might just softly be kind of wiggling back and forth, but if I tighten it up close to that dodger and it's really flipping, that thing has a lot of action. 12 and 14-inch leaders, for the most part, you want to put a small smile blade. This here is a bunch of little LP squids with some beads, double hooks, lots of flash, little gold blade. Remember when I said about gold? Little gold blades on top of your little LP squids. Okay, now this is stuff we're building at home, but I can get stuff similar. I can take these little coconut things from Max. I can put a bead on top of that and put a smile blade on top of that, and it kind of has everything I need to get started with. You can take something that's manufactured. I can add a couple components to it and create something that has a little more zing to it, right? So making lures is pretty simple, but you know, these I've made, these you can buy. These are little cha-cha squidders with a smile blade on top of them, beads, a little hoochie body. These are little LP squids with some flash and extras in it, and I put some smile blades on top. Do they both work? Absolutely. Will I use one or the other? Depends on the day. And if I'm putting multiple rods out, sometimes I put out a couple of these and a few of these, and I let them tell me which ones they want. And then I'm loading my rods with either or. Okay? It's nice to have different size lures in your presentation. There's a big difference between the Kokanee cut plugs and these little beaded rigs with just a little flash on them, right? Presentation size-wise and what I'm putting in front of their face, that's a big difference. Some days they're going after this stuff, some days you can't get them to bite. You got to scale way down. Why? I don't know. They're fish. It's up to us to figure them out. They got the brain the size of a pea, and most days I'm outsmarted. Ticks you off. So, variance of size in your arsenal. Because some days the bigger stuff works, the bigger HOODIES. Notice the colors. Pinks, oranges, chartreuse, greens, right? Because I'm not putting everything out just one color. Some days you're knocking the heck out of them on pink. You go back the next morning, it's like, oh, we got this dialed. We throw all them pink lures back on, we can't get bit, can't get bit. I'm going to throw an orange one on over here. Bang. Okay, switch a couple out to orange. You had a question first.
In your opinion, what's more important to vary the depth or the lure, the presentation?
Depth is always determined by what my electronics are telling me and where I'm seeing fish. If you're out fishing, you have electronics, and you're asking another boat, how deep are you finding them? That's a question you should never ask because you have your own electronics. How deep are you finding them? And then we start doing that whole math thing. How far is my setback? What size dodger, right? And if I know I'm fishing at depth and I'm marking fish and I feel confident that I'm going back and forth and I'm staying on those fish, I'm just not getting bit. That's when I start going through the rotation. Is it dodger, color, or action of dodger? Because the dodgers have different actions that they impart. They act differently. So is it the dodger, is it the color, is it the length of leader, is it the color of lure? It's a progression, right?
They say that kokanee are eating shrimp a lot, and they're teeny. And even a small squid is 1.5 inches, and on trout they use a size 20 fly. Do you ever go even more micro on kokanee?
I've gone down to just beads and a little bit of flash. No smile blade, no nothing. 7-inch leader right behind, something like this. Yep. Little 7-inch leader, and it's just whipping back and forth. So when you say shrimp, it's mysis shrimp, which is tiny. Most of the time they're eating zooplankton or zooplankton. They're plankton eaters for the most part. Some of those shrimp are balled up in the plankton because they're feeding on the plankton as well. So it just depends on the fishery and where you find them, but they're microscopic feeders. So why a fish that's a microscopic feeder is, grabbing this. It's no different than when we're pulling plugs in a river for salmon or steelhead, and I'm using, like for Chinook or Coho, I'm using a K16 plug, big plug, and I get a 14-inch cutthroat that bites it. And the plug is almost 3/4 the size of that fish. But they're ferocious little eaters, and they go after it because of the attraction, the scent, the color, the action. They're aggressive, right? So they're going to jump on it because they're aggressive. Kokanee, it's a mind blow. I mean, we're using stuff way bigger all the time than anything they ever eat, and nothing we put in front of them looks anything or resembles anything close to what's natural in nature. I can't explain that to you. All I know is that lures with lots of color and flash, UV, and we'll get into scents and types of bait here in a minute, but it's what works, so that's why we use it.
Do you match the color of your lure and your dodger?
No, it's usually, when we say match, if I'm running this arrow flash, and I'm running, these are some of my favorites that I've tied up. This is a little LP orange or pink bodied little hoochie with various colors of smile blade on there, right? A .08 smile blade. So that's a deadly combination. There's nothing really similar about that, but that's not to say with this gold flasher that this same body presence and style of lure with a gold blade on it can be just as productive. And sometimes it's as simple as trolling around for about an hour or so not getting bit, and I'm dragging this, and I switch over to this, which is very similar but has now a pink smile blade, and they start biting. And you're just like, that, I mean, seriously, that's all it took? Sometimes that's all it takes. That's why even if you fish by yourself, do yourself a favor, get a 2-rod endorsement, because you're going to be able to swap gear, you're going to be able to put stuff in front of them, drag it for a while, it's not working, swap one rod out, change the dodger. Over here we're going to change the lure, keep rolling that dodger because I have confidence in it, right? So, my stopwatch. What time we got, Mark? 12:50. Okay. So your gear options and your lures, I mean, it's at your fingertips. Start off buying if you need to. Get online and look, watch videos, see what other people are doing, watch our show. We're going to teach you a lot, especially as we get into the spring, because I get into a lot of kokanee fishing. And we can take, like I said, those manufactured lures, and we can put smile blades and beads on top of them, and it's a totally different presentation, okay? So, for the most part, your manufactured lures are going to have real small number 4 hooks on them. And they're going to be very closely tied together. Not that it doesn't work, but I choose to use, I didn't drag them out. I'm using Gamakatsu drop shot hooks, which is a little wider gap, a little longer hook. And when I tie those leaders together, I'm putting one finger in between the hooks. I want separation. I want that trailer hook to be 1 to 2 finger lengths behind that top hook. The top hook is usually buried within the skirt of the hoochie or the LP squid or whatever I'm using, and that trailer hook is way out there. Now, kokanee have really soft mouths, and they spin around and flop around a whole lot. And oftentimes you'll lose them because it tears right out of their mouth, especially if you're using a rod that's a little bit stiff and not as forgiving as something that's truly designated for kokanee. That's why we use these parabolic bending rods. That is your bungee in your system that allows the fish to flop around, the rod's going back and forth. If it's too stiff and the fish does this, you rip the lips right off the fish. A trailer hook with a little separation oftentimes may get in the side of the head, through the skin in the head, through the side of the jaw, something a little more stable. Your hook up to land ratio goes up exponentially. It's not snagging fish, they're biting at your lure, it's just a matter where that secondary hook lodges into the fish. Now if you get them stuck in the side of the head, sometimes it comes in like an oversized cut plug herring, and it's like rotating in the water, and you're thinking, I got a 9-pound kokanee. Oh, it's a 12-inch kokanee. It's just because of the way it came in. But it does work as far as hook up to land ratio by just simply creating a little separation in that leader on your hooks versus having them like a lot of the companies will come out with on those hooks are literally tied one right after the other. Not a lot of separation in there, okay? So something to think about in that regard. LP squids, regular 2.5-inch hoochies. I mean, when you start tying your own lures, you're going to start collecting the little LP squids and the 2.5-inch squids, and you get a lot of hoochies going, a lot of beads, okay? I just pulled these out of, I got a tote that's got all this stuff packed in it. And smile blades of various sizes, lots of different colors because you're creating color contrast, lots of UVs, different size lures, and you just start accumulating this stuff. Don't let the spouse know, just keep it hidden in the garage and, and tie your lures and start getting creative. There's so many options to use, and you can use, and I do, a lot of the Max smile blades, but I also look for real small gold and silver blades as well as an alternative, so I'm not just always running the smile blades, okay? Something different, all right? Bait and scent. I've been with Potskis for a long time. They came out with kokanee corn, the shoe peg corn, years ago. You can get it in natural white, you can get it in yellow, you can get it in pink, you can get it in dark red. It really has no scent. The easiest way to add scent to my corn is to take my Mike's oil, my Atlas Mike's oil, and I basically take the corn, dump it into a container, squirt some of the oil on there, stir it around, put it back in my jar. During kokanee and trout season, this tray is full of jars of corn. This one is marked krill anise and it's white. This one is marked shrimp anise, and it's pink. This one is marked crayfish, and it's pink. My point is, you can create all different bait, color, scent combinations based on the color of corn you select and the oil that you put in it. And you keep it in the refrigerator, it lasts a long time. The corn's been cooked at the factory, right? So it's done. The oils are great. They're not going to break down, especially if you keep them in the fridge. If it's hot spring and summertime, you have a cooler on your boat, keep your bait in the cooler, except if you have it out on your boat because you're using it. One piece of corn on each hook, that's all you need. If you have multiple baits and you have a couple rods out, put one color of corn and scent on one rig and put something else on the other rig. It's no different than changing lures. You follow me? You're giving them options. A lot of times the tuna garlic. Tuna garlic is almost synonymous with getting results with kokanee. Shrimp anise. If I'm running two, I'm going tuna garlic, shrimp anise. Pink or white, doesn't matter. You start fishing your lakes and bodies of water, you start figuring it out. But people get all balled up about, oh, I got to get the Jolly Green Giant big can of Shoepay corn, and I got to add all this stuff to it to color it up and harden it up. And I'm like, why go through all that? You literally can buy this, add some oil. It's going to last a long time. It's productive. If it wasn't, I wouldn't be telling you guys to do this. And for, you know, within a decent budget, I can buy 5 or 6 different colors of corn, a handful of different scents of oil, and I can create all the different baits and scents that I need. Okay? And it's going to last. I've actually had this stuff last throughout the entire season. I come back next spring and I pull it out of the fridge and I go fishing and it works. Okay? So if you don't use it all, don't get rid of it. Start your season out with it and see if it doesn't still work. Okay, we kind of talked about a lot of that. Here's your average size kokanee. We just moved off of Summit Lake, and these fish are off of Summit Lake, and they were a nice average, always 14, 15-inch fish. And they were there pretty consistently. Okay? They like water temperature that's 50 to 53 degrees. As the spring rolls into summer and it gets warmer, the fish go deeper. I could be fishing a lake with a surface temp of 75 degrees and I'd be down 75 feet and the water temp's probably in that 50 range. And I can dial up my electronics and find my thermocline. I can see the feed is down there at 70 feet or so, 75 feet, and that's where I'm seeing the schools of kokanee. So as it warms up, they're going to go deeper. Okay? Early season though, and that's what this whole thing started out with. Early season, we can get them quite a bit higher in the water column. Springtime, you start fishing trout, you're going to start finding kokanee on lakes that have them. So go after them because they're not that deep. All right? And we're probably about out of time. 2 minutes. Anybody got a question? Oh, God.
Consider early season like a Lake Roosevelt person.
So on Roosevelt, yeah. So it's open year round.
Right.
So if you're out there right now, it's a little different over there because that will produce in cold water fisheries as well. Like there's a well-known winter fishery over there. That being said, the kokanee fishing over there has gotten tougher, but the triploid rainbow fishing can be pretty good. And this time of year, doing exactly what we're doing for kokanee, 10 to 15, 20 feet down, you're getting nice sized triploids, and every once in a while you get a bonus kokanee. By June into July, we're getting those kokanee over there at 45 to 75 feet. It just depends on how much water is being flowed out of the dam, how much the temperature varies. There's a lot of variables. But if you can be over there for a week or so and you can get some consistency and mark the fish, you might see that lone wolf big-bodied kokanee at 45 feet, and you may pull that one fish, and then the rest of the day you're catching all rainbow. A lot of variables.
So if you're on Merwin or Ryan or American, what's early season?
Well, for lakes that are open year-round, those lakes typically haven't performed real well in cold water, so I'd always start fishing them like June. Water temperature is still cold. Until we get into a good pattern of sunny days and warmer evening temperatures, your lake temperatures stay pretty cold until they invert, and then you start seeing a warming trend and the fish start going deeper. But if you're out there in March, April, that's cold water fishery. That's early spring, and those fish, if you're finding them, they're going to be up suspended. They're going to be up suspended. So, anything else? Okay, appreciate you hanging out. Hopefully it was worth your time.